What is going on, guys? JD from New York here. Obviously, there's a lot going on with this SummerSlam weekend, and we have no shortage of news. But one of the biggest things that's happening right now is not SummerSlam, believe it or not. Quiet on all fronts there. One of the biggest things that is happening right now is coming out of the AEW women's locker room. As you guys know, there is unrest in the women's locker room. I made a specific video on this last week. Again, yes, as Jesse, as you see, I'm here with Jesse because I feel like it's best when these situations occur that we are together so that we get the best content out as possible instead of hearing one person's point of view and then another person's point of view. But I made a video on this last weekend, and I was very clear, very direct on how I feel about the women's division. This does not only go for the AEW women's division, it goes for the WWE women's division as well. If you don't think that there's something going on back there, cliques and politics and pockets of unrest with certain people, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Jesse and I don't work there, but it happened once, and now it's happening again. And like Jesse's been telling me all week, where there is smoke, there is fire with this situation. And a lot of the talent right now are speaking up in regards to LuFisto, who was interviewed by Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com. And I listened to the interview. It was very well done. And I actually feel bad for Sapp because all of this is just an avalanche coming down on top of him now that I don't really know if he expected it to be this bad. And it's gotten really fucking bad. So before we get into anything, I want to read some of the key points from this interview, okay? She set up an interview or an appearance with Elevation, and she was set to meet with QT Marshall to be, I guess, a coach or try out for a producer position or a coach position. There was some confusion about medical testing she went into and paperwork. LuFisto's from Quebec and a Canadian citizen. But everything got sorted out in time for her to be at the April 6th show in Boston. She was greeted at the venue by Sean Dean, she documented, then left to wait in the women's locker room. It was there where she said hi to the bunny, who we have not seen on TV in quite some time, who allegedly responded, "What are you doing here?" So immediately, imagine that, Jesse. Imagine walking into the locker room to get paid to do a job and then go home and then be greeted with, "What the fuck are you doing here?" It's crazy.
That's not very welcoming.
No, it's not very welcoming at all.
No.
Bunny was seated. I'm sorry, Jesse. What you want to add something there?
I mean, you know what? This will go better a little bit later in the discussion. Go ahead. And
Okay. She was greeted at the venue by Sean Dean. Blah blah blah. Bunny was seated with Ruby Soho and Toni Storm. Ruby Soho and Toni Storm, part of the same faction, cliques, sitting together, as you guys know. Jade Cargill was there as well. She was seated separately. We haven't seen Jade since she's lost the TBS championship, and she was backstage. None of them spoke to her. Mercedes Martinez was there, and Mercedes Martinez is someone who she knew from outside AEW, was said to be happy to see her. She later says Thunder Rosa was there, but no one was speaking, Jesse, to Thunder Rosa at all. She was sitting by herself. So Thunder Rosa's there. Thunder Rosa is still rehabilitating. She is backstage because she does color commentary for the Spanish announce team for AEW. So she does have a job to do while still maintaining being on the road with AEW. Now, LuFisto's priority was to talk to Tony Khan about a coaching position in the company, but she never met with him. She says that she had a nice initial conversation with Mark Henry, Christian Cage, and Dustin Rhodes. Dustin Rhodes is apparently one of the leaders in that women's locker room. He takes care of a lot of the women's division stuff. There was some confusion about her match, who she was working with, if she'd do an entrance, etc., etc. At one point while waiting, she came upon Dustin and Ruby Soho and believes they were talking about her. LuFisto claims Rhodes' demeanor towards her changed after his conversation with Soho, with his next words to her being, "So all French-Canadian people are fucking assholes, eh?" That's what Dustin Rhodes apparently said to LuFisto. This is her words on the interview with Sapp. Her match ended up being with the Bunny and Emi Sakura against Soho, Anna Jay, and Sky Blue. LuFisto was going to start with Sky Blue, who is, how old is Sky Blue, Jesse? 21, 20, 22 years old? Very young. LuFisto was going to start with Sky Blue, so she tried to talk to her about what they were going to do, but didn't get much from her. In the interview, LuFisto theorizes the reason was because either she's bland or she's either bland as a person or she's not allowed to talk. So she kind of indirectly, or I guess directly in this case, kind of threw Sky Blue under the bus with some negative comments there. Meanwhile, Sky Blue didn't even have an interaction with her beforehand in the locker room. So that's what she stated there. She said that Sky Blue is bland as a person or she's not allowed to talk on her own. Nothing major goes wrong during the match. And there's some confusion about what LuFisto should do around the finish. When she got backstage afterwards, Dustin was waiting for her to say she was terrible, she tells Sapp. She claims she had to press him to explain what issues he had, which were mostly about selling more for the contracted talent. So it wasn't about what she did on her end as far as what she did in the match. It was about what she didn't do for his women, Dustin's women in that locker room. She asked some male talent she knew for feedback on her match, but no one had watched it. It's probably on Dark, I'm assuming, so I don't blame them. One of them tells her no one watches the matches at AEW. No one watches I'm assuming nobody watches the women's matches at AEW. The unnamed person told her wrestlers pretty much do what they want. I'm not saying that in a good way. Another one got back to LuFisto later after watching her match to say it wasn't bad and she did what she could do with the limited time given to her, which I'm assuming if it was on Dark, it probably lasted, what, Jesse? 60 seconds, fucking 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops? I mean, give me a break with this shit.
3 minutes? That's an Iron Man match, bro. What's wrong with you?
On Dark, it's an Iron Man match.
Yeah. Man, ooh, man.
LuFisto described what she observed backstage as chaotic and remembers watching people sit in the same area while talking shit about each other and thinking, I'm with fucking children. After the appearance, LuFisto had issues getting paid. This was something to do with paperwork and her visa issues. Other issues LuFisto says she witnessed or was hearing backstage at AEW include women politicking, wink, wink, to protect their positions and setting others up to look bad in the ring. LuFisto didn't interact with Britt Baker during this visit, because I know everybody was slamming Britt Baker online during all of this, blaming her. She was actually not mentioned in this interview at all. LuFisto did not mention Britt Baker at all. It was the fans on social media that did. She didn't interact with Britt during her visit, but says Baker is one person she has been told does these things. It was the only time she mentioned Britt. Other than that, there was no negative connotation on Britt Baker's name.
I think that's very telling.
It is very telling.
For a couple of different reasons, and we'll circle back to that.
Yeah. So Britt supposedly politics, which, I mean, Britt Baker's one of the biggest names in that division. I would assume that she does. And Tony Khan is a huge fan of Britt Baker, so I'm sure she gets away with a lot. I mean, we don't need to be in the locker room to know that. I mean, just watch the fucking show. Men who aren't invested in women's wrestling having power over the division. Baker is one person she has been told does these things, and men aren't invested in women's wrestling having power over the division. She's also generally noted that there wasn't a defined power structure at the company. Jesse, something that, who was it that said it? Big Swole said that same exact thing, and what happened to her, bro? She got fucking blackballed and outcast as well. Am I correct there?
I'm glad you bring up Big Swole, because that is a part of something else that I want to talk about.
Okay, well, listen, folks. Yeah, this is why I got Jesse here, man. He may be filling in the blanks that I don't have in front of me, but, you know, Big Swole was thrown on the bus for the same fucking reasons. If it happens once, all right, maybe it's a mistake. Happens twice with the same wording and the same issues, that's when we have some fucking issues, man. That's when we have some smoke to that fire.
And you said this was the second time. It's not the second time. This is the third. Big Swole was the first.
Yeah, well, who was the second? Thunder Rosa. There you go. Third time. There you go.
Third time.
There you go. So in the interview, she talked about her history with Ruby Soho, which apparently has been bad since at least 2016 when LuFisto was a guest of Pat Patterson's at WrestleMania and ran into Ruby backstage. She also documented her issues with Jacques Rougeau, a.k.a. the Mountie. I used to love the Mountie, which she thinks may have poisoned the well for her with QT. So that was the interview. That was the interview with Sapp, Jesse. That is basically all the key points. And then we get to social media. And I know you saw this yesterday. Dustin Rhodes immediately after the interview ended, legitimately within the hour, was on social media, on Twitter. And he tweets this. He says, and I quote, "Hey, LuFisto, read your story, and sometimes a coach, or as a coach, I have to be very honest and won't ever tell you a lie about how good or bad it was. Sometimes hard love comes out and wouldn't have it any other way. I hope you find what you're looking for. Hashtag keep stepping." Nicole Matthews, another independent wrestler, on that same day said this: "You know who's one of my favorite people ever that I've ever met in professional wrestling? After not seeing her lovely face in 5 years, the second I saw her again at AEW, she ran up to me and gave me the most giant hug. It was like no time had passed at all," meaning Ruby Soho. "One thing she said that stuck with me was, you always remember the ones who treated you right on the way up. Funny that," which kind of gives you a glimpse into where Ruby Soho and LuFisto's relationship, Jesse, since 2016, probably never recovered. Apparently, Ruby Soho may be coming on up and, wanting a big break. LuFisto was not very kind to her, and Ruby Soho has every right to not feel an obligation to talk to her if that's the case. If LuFisto didn't do anything to help Ruby Soho along the way, and Ruby doesn't have to say anything. But that was the extent of social media yesterday, and we will get into what happened the next day, legitimately, about everything that happened, and we'll stop here for now. So, Jesse, I'll leave the floor to you about what's going on here and the situation, but, we'll get into a little bit more detailed situation, which kind of exposes everything for the AEW women's locker room, but I don't really find anything that she said in this interview to be terribly bad or wrong. She had a bad experience there. I mean, everybody has a bad experience here or there. It's not immune to anybody, but it seems that the entire situation is stemming from what happened with Ruby Soho. And she seems to be a center of this problem here. And like I said, Ruby doesn't have to talk. But I would think that if LuFisto was walking into the locker room, and Ruby Soho obviously is a leader of that locker room, Jesse, don't you think that some professionalism should be shown at some point? Not to say, and we got on Punk's case, we got on the Bucks case, and Paige and Kenny Omega, professionalism is key, bro. And this all goes back to that. And then it kind of cycles right back to Tony Khan. It seemingly feels like Ruby Soho has every right to feel how she wants to feel, but did not show any type of professionalism whatsoever as being a leader of that locker room. And Dustin Rhodes kind of playing favoritism here. And again, it cycles back to Tony Khan. He doesn't have a fucking clue as to what's going on in his goddamn locker room.
So, yeah. So now, look, if LuFisto and Ruby had an interaction that was not very friendly, all right, then it entirely makes sense as to why Ruby was not warm and welcoming to, welcoming her into the locker room that she had established herself in. And that's just human nature, man. It makes sense, but the term professional wrestler comes into play when you decide to move your animosity from I'm not a fan of this person to I'm going to make sure that everyone that I have the ear of will also not be a fan of this person.
Yeah.
That's where it starts to become like, look, dude, if she was mean to you in any way coming up, you didn't appreciate it and you made it up, above her, and now she's trying to come up. It is not your job to help her get over. It is not your job to help her in any way, because you feel the way you feel for valid reasons, okay? Now, I want to start there. Then I want to go to, that does not mean that you blackball her or ruin her chances or speak very, very poorly of her to people that would matter in her career in AEW just because you don't like her, okay? That part is extremely shitty. Now, take it from a guy who, and if anyone, watching this know me, they know I have a seriously hard time forgiving people that I feel have terribly wronged me in the past. I mean, we're talking like close friends, friends since high school. I mean, people who know me, they know. I mean, once you've crossed, I'm not saying once you piss me off, I hate you forever. There's a line for everyone. There is a proverbial line for everyone that once you cross that, there's no coming back. For me, once that line is crossed, there is no coming back. I have a relative I have not spoken to in about 20 fucking years because he crossed that line that I just feel like there's no coming back from. So I understand her being pissed off about it, but I don't go around and blackball those people. I don't call that family member's job to try to get them fired. You know, I keep to myself. There's no bitterness going forward. We just end this between me and you. Now, if the company that I work for wants to hire you and you get hired on your own merit, it sucks. I just got to work with you. I don't like it, but it sucks. But it is wrong to try to impose your negative experience with that person onto a coach or onto a manager or into someone else in the locker room that you share, you know, the locker room with. That part becomes extremely wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like when she walked in, she didn't really get greeted well by a couple of women back there. And then Ruby and Dustin were sitting down trying to go over the match that both Ruby and LuFisto were going to be a part of. And while LuFisto was not in the conversation, she was looking over at Ruby talk to Dustin, and who knows if those prior engagements were brought up in the conversation with Dustin and Ruby got in Dustin's ear, and then that's what spawned his attitude towards LuFisto because he's going to back his women and his locker room instead of the outsider who's just there for a quick day and a payday. That's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like blatant favoritism, and that's kind of fucked up because she's there to help, you know, whatever AEW needs, and she's already being labeled as an outcast. Now, we don't know if Ruby or LuFisto and LuFisto have had a conversation in regards to squash any beef that they had. It sounds like that has not happened. So it's none of our business, really, but you would think that at some point since 2016, some of these issues would have been raised, and they would have possibly talked it out. Clearly, that seems like it's not the case.
Right. And for me, and if this is the origin of all of this, for me, the first person I'm looking at is actually not TK, but it is Dustin. He seems to be the first line of defense to stop that kind of propaganda. The second that Ruby potentially came to him and said, "Hey, you know, in paraphrasing, I can't stand this bitch because of this, and this. I don't want to work with her, so do your best to get her out." Whatever the case may be. If it happened, it would be Dustin's job to say, "Okay, well, yeah, that sucks, but you know, we got to give her a fair shake. We're not going to do this, you know, this pettiness, you know, from back then. And if you guys have had issues and if she makes it onto the roster from her own merit, then that's just something you guys are going to have to work out. So let's just not act that way." And then when Ruby trots away, my next move from Dustin is right to Tony Khan to say, "Hey, just so you are aware of the potential situation with LuFisto, Ruby just came to me and said this and said this. Now management is aware. Now we're not spreading it, and now we can stop it from getting to where we're having to do this show right here tonight."
Yeah, I don't know if Dustin actually went to Tony Khan. If he did, Tony Khan didn't do anything. We don't know any of that. But apparently everybody else sat around and they were minding their own fucking business. It's like, you know, it really is like the Wild Wild West back there from what this reads. So we got that far, okay? So LuFisto knew she was going to get attacked here. She knew that she was going to get attacked, and she actually tweeted out right after the interview, hours later. She said, and I quote, "Had a 1-hour phone call with a current AEW talent. The women who actually addressed the problems I did today were the ones sent home by Tony Khan." Okay. I'm reading that, my eyebrows are raised. I'm like, well, that's a problem, okay?
Right.
There's a meeting to shoot, or there was a meeting to shoot on Thunder Rosa that Tony Khan attended. Now, we don't know if that's actually true or not. We don't know if there was a meeting to shoot on Thunder Rosa. I mean, if Thunder Rosa was in the locker room, why would they be holding a meeting on Thunder Rosa to shoot on Thunder Rosa? You know, Thunder Rosa was mentioned in the interview. I mean, that doesn't really make sense to me. Then Britt goes on Twitter. I'm going to add this in here. Britt goes on Twitter and said that Thunder Rosa actually led the meeting. We were not shooting on Thunder Rosa, nor did we set up a meeting to shoot on Thunder Rosa. So, I mean, LuFisto says one thing, Britt Baker says another. Nobody really knows what's going on. All we know is that Thunder Rosa was at the center of problems. Same type of problems that LuFisto is now raising here. She goes on to continue and say, when some girls arranged a meeting to talk about Baker's crew, which we know has been an issue in the past, one of them ran to Britt to let her know. Jesse, that sounds eerily similar to what you and I know about Thunder Rosa and the issue with Thunder Rosa there. I mean,
I'm glad you spotted that too.
I mean, sounds very, very similar, man. That's 2 times now we've heard the same story. Once is all right. I'll let it go. I'll sweep it under the rug. Happens a second time. That's when we got a fucking problem.
Is there anyone in Britt's inner circle that's involved in this situation in any way?
I don't know. The girls that wanted to address the problem were the ones punished.
What do you mean we don't know? Who's the first one we started talking about with LuFisto?
Ruby Soho. There you go. The girls that wanted to address the problem were the ones punished, she said. So they raised the problems, and apparently management deemed them, all right, we're going to punish you. So that sounds very weird to me. Like you raise awareness to problems that aren't really, or shouldn't be in the locker room, and then you're punished for raising the fucking problems? Raising awareness for the problems? What type of environment is that? So do we want a better women's division? Do we want a solid locker room or not? Like, what the fuck is the problem?
Exactly, dude. I mean, what are we doing here?
I never heard of such stupidity. How do you raise awareness to a fucking obvious problem that is going to boil over and get worse as time goes on, and you're punished for raising the problems that others are causing?
Man, look, man. This is why, and I've opened Twitter more times today than I have like in the last month to have this discussion with people, and it just got all heated and crazy and everything else. Here's my overall problem, and not a problem, but my overall stance on this is, okay, so being a minority, being a black man myself, and having to have complained about so many racial issues that I've personally had to deal with over my life, just for it to get to the ears that needed to matter for them to not believe or look the other way or kind of brush it under the rug. I know what that feeling is like, okay? So women, I know, have had very similar struggles, as of late with the speaking out and Me Too and everything else. And, and I hate to bring stuff up like this, but unfortunately, sexual assault in those cases that, that are pertinent to this, when the victim speaks up, there are way too many people that want to victim shame the person for speaking up. Well, why'd you take so long? And maybe you should have did it then. Well, why did they do it to you and not the other 15 people back there and everything else? And granted, it is one person's word against another's, but when now it's happened multiple times to multiple different people in multiple different instances and occasions and situations, and you still refuse to pay more attention to the people making the complaints, that's where it kind of hits to me like, look, man, I don't want to just believe everyone that says this, but you got to take everything and just kind of put it in your own processing bank and figure out your own conclusion, because none of us were there. So you got to try to sit down and process what makes sense. Could this have happened? Has it been accused before? Oh, it has. Is it likely? I don't know if it's likely, but it's possible. Now, what if there was you in their shoes and you would explain this to people that your close loved ones, and tell them the situation, and they would say things like, well, you should go public with it. You should say something. You should speak up. Just for you to do that, and then half the community says, oh, I don't believe you. Well, why? Well, I don't believe you. I'm going to pick my own reasons why I don't believe you. But
mostly it's favoritism.
Yeah. So what do you have to do? If you're the one that's been wronged in this, what are you supposed to do? Because everything that you do is going to look at and be scrutinized like you should have done this, or you shouldn't have done, or you're just a liar. How many more instances are you just going to ignore? before you say, okay, all right. Again, like I've said to you many times in the past, where there's smoke, there's fire. As an owner, if I'm TK, like, let me get to the bottom of this. All right. Let me sit down with everyone individually. Let me make sure things are being done the right way. And let me make a public statement along the lines of, I've heard the allegations from LuFisto. That kind of demeanor and activity is not permitted and or welcome in AEW. And if she was made to feel that way, you know, we will look into this and make sure that it gets corrected and that it never happens again, because we don't condone these kind of things, as opposed to just quietly half the locker room now tweeting and defending AEW out of the fucking blue.
I will get to that, because I saw your tweet. I instantly retweeted it because it was exactly the same thing that I was thinking. Legitimately, Jesse, it was like a fucking marching order of tweets in the same hour from everybody in the locker room and friends of those in the locker room who had a problem with LuFisto. So it's like, I mean, what do you think? We're fucking stupid? You don't think nobody's going to see that and call that out?
That's just so wrong.
That's a terrible mentality. And to go back to what you said, Jesse, never mind what happened here and what you just beautifully said. It's the vibe in the locker room, man. It's the environment and the precedent that they set. Imagine somebody who's not signed and wants to join AEW and wants to join this women's locker room and be in this women's division. Imagine seeing somebody raise awareness to problems there and then get punished for it. Imagine the precedent that you're setting for every other younger female in that locker room that potentially wants to get that graphic that Tony Khan puts up on Twitter claiming that they're all elite. They're not going to want to join this fucking locker room. If there's ever a fucking problem and you speak up about it, now you're going to get punished because you're not a part of a clique. You're not friends with Britt Baker. You're not friends with Jade Cargill. You're not sitting amongst the fucking elite in the locker room. You got to work your way up there and you're a nobody until you do, or worst case, until we accept you. You know, AEW wants to, tout that they're the alternative in pro wrestling. This sounds very similar to when Vince McMahon's in charge, bro. How many fucking people speak up about anything when Vince McMahon is there? Zero. And when you do, what happens? Fired, worst case, taken off TV, and you're never seen again until your fucking contract runs out. That's a terrible way to look at things, bro.
Yes, it is. It's and you mentioned Sky Blue in the interview and how she just got quiet and walked away. Sky Blue is the greenest of green and the rookiest of rookies in that locker room. She has no position to speak up and go against the status quo and not get herself in trouble. So I understand why she would stay quiet.
Yes, because she's gotten a massive amount of TV time this summer.
Yep.
Does she want to lose that? Fuck no. The reason why she stayed quiet is because she doesn't want to ruffle any feathers, because those who spoke up got punished.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
What happens to you.
Ridiculous. LuFisto goes on to continue and say things didn't get better. Things got worse. As for the legitimate wrestlers, believe Tony Khan doesn't give a damn about women's wrestling and feel like they are going back to the Divas era. We're not going back to the Divas era, but she did start off saying that Tony Khan doesn't give a damn about women's wrestling. I don't need to hear that from LuFisto. Jesse doesn't need to hear that. Jesse doesn't need to hear that from LuFisto. We can watch the fucking TV shows and realize that Tony Khan and management, I'm not blaming TK solely, that management doesn't give a shit about women's wrestling and they just do what they got to do to basically get by week to week. So she's not wrong there. She's not.
Well, I agree with you, but I don't know about not blaming. You can't not blame the guy that has publicly come out and says, I am the CEO, chairman, head of creative, head of everything in AEW. But then something in AEW happens, like, whoa, that's not his fault. Everything is your fucking fault. All of it. Whether you participated in it or failed to squash it in some way or another, it directly comes. You can't take the good stuff and throw the bad stuff to the side and say that's someone else. It's all you. Yeah. It's all you. On some level or another, you should have ended this.
Ask me who the fuck I am, she says. Tell me I'm irrelevant and that I'm doing this for attention. Call me a liar. Tell me to kill myself. You keep on closing your eyes and supporting human beings with shitty behavior. With messages of support, and especially this phone call I received from AEW employees, nobody did the right thing. Then we get to today, and we have everybody in marching order tweeting out in support of the AEW women's locker room. The first person that I saw was, I believe it was Renee Paquette. She says, we have an incredible women's division that all look out for and support each other. I've never seen it be anything other than a safe space for a bunch of kick-ass women that all want to see each other and all of AEW shine to their full potential. Women hating women is a real dusty take. Tay Mello says, I'm pregnant and I'm going to see a high-risk doctor. I'm going through a lot. I'm going to AEW to make myself happy. The whole locker room makes me feel loved. They listen to me. They support me. Last Wednesday, Ruby gave me a big hug and told me how proud she is and reminded me how strong I am. I don't know what that has to do with the women's division, but I'm glad you have I'm glad you found a family in the AEW women's locker room. We're not talking about anything else but what's happening on TV and the locker room mentality there with talent coming in and talent going out and talent that's not being pushed and politics and all this other garbage. She made it completely something different than what we were talking about here. Moving on from that, we have Ruby making a statement. The women in the AEW locker room don't just claim to be in support of women's wrestling. They show it. Really now? Do they show it? I fail to see that sometimes, Jesse. I don't know. Do they show it? That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. Take your time with that one. She says, whether you see it or not, the ones who don't ask for credit after they stand in Gorilla and cheer for two women who beat the piss out of each other for your amusement. The ones who lend an enhancement talent their knee pads because they forgot theirs at home. The ones who sit in the locker room with a sobbing peer for an hour to console her when she's having a bad day. Those women are silent heroes. Just because the voices you hear are the loudest doesn't mean those voices are speaking the truth. Britt Baker went on to say something as well. She mentioned Thunder Rosa. Someone called out Thunder Rosa. A fan said, well, what about Thunder Rosa? Are the claims that you wanted to shoot on her true? Is LuFisto lying about that? Is what she said true or false? Britt says false. Thunder called the meeting to discuss multiple personal issues. There was no meeting to shoot on her. These are salacious Twitter rumors. I'm sure when she's ready, she can help clarify. Saraya says, the narrative going around is very disheartening considering someone says they want the best for the women's division, but buries it in a number of tweets. I will say being in this company close to a year, my favorite part is being with the girls in the locker room. They uplift, support, and laugh with each other every week and only want the best for one another. We hype each other up. We buy each other wrestling gear sometimes just as a little surprise. We text each other daily, and we are there as a shoulder too. This is one of the best locker rooms I've been in, and I refuse to let people twist it to be otherwise. Love y'all. Saraya said something. MJF was one of the few men in the locker room, and I know Jesse was going back and forth with Geeks Online about this one, and we'll get to MJF's because he took the knife and fucking stabbed it right in LuFisto's chest. If you listen to miserable people who never made it in this sport, that's not exactly the brightest thing to do. Use your brain. If someone's been in the professional wrestling realm for over a decade and you find them to be talented, but they've never truly panned out, there's a reason for it. And he lists 1, 2, and 3. 1, lack of talent. 2, difficulty to work with. 3, delusional, just to name a few. And Taya Valkyrie will end with this one here before we move on. This narrative that all the AEW women hate each other is quite frankly annoying. I've been there for 5 months, and everyone from the second I walked in that building has been nothing but supportive, hyping each other up, and badass. Stop pinning women against each other. It's getting old.
That was not the narrative. Taya Valkyrie already lost me when she said this narrative of all the... That was not the narrative. No one said that everyone took part in all of this stuff. She's speaking about her personal experience, period.
Everybody like a marching order, bro. Tweeting out at the same time. You know, I saw this. You tweeted about it. Seemingly looks like TK sent out the memo to get everybody to make sure the vibe in the AEW locker room or the rumors about the vibe in the AEW locker room are where they need to be, right? As they are coming up on their biggest show ever. But that clearly is not the way to go about it. I mean, like you said before, Tony Khan himself or AEW media on Twitter should have put out a professional statement claiming that the AEW women's locker room and blah, 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 and word it how you need to word it. But they had everybody go out there, and this was not the only thing that happened from AEW. Independent wrestlers who don't like LuFisto spoke out. I know Deonna Purrazzo said something. Other independent talent like Nicole Matthews said something. I mean, is that really necessary? Like, we're professionals here, and they did everything to go against that. And that's kind of the shitty way to look at it. And MJF, while I appreciate MJF sticking up for his fucking locker room, honestly, showing the leader that he really is, Jesse, yes. I don't think that MJF as the world champion and the guy there, the leader of that locker room, necessarily needs to put himself in the line of fire like that. Because I think, well, would Roman Reigns do that for WWE? I don't know if Roman Reigns would go on social media and do something like this. It would be WWE sending out a statement and not having half the fucking locker room attack in gang warfare here. MJF tried to do good. I don't think it really came off as good, but I respect what he did immensely for sticking up for his locker room because that's his job. He's the guy there.
He's at the top of the food chain in that place. It is literally his job to go out there and say something like this, especially if I seriously believe that they were directed to go out and
absolutely.
I mean, because there's Dustin. You said Dustin commented on this yesterday.
Yes.
Someone tweeted at me, he's like, oh, maybe that they were just following suit to support the first one who tweeted. Then where was this string of tweets yesterday when Dustin said something? 24 hours later, right around the same time, we get a slew of tweets, and everybody wants to think, not everybody, just some of the people in my timeline, wants to think that it was all a coincidence. Could it have been? Dude, it's anything. If there's a 0.0001 chance of something, then it could have been. Perception is reality. And even if this was not true, it's messed up for them because the perception is you sent all of these people out there to tweet in defense of this company. And that was your attempt at damage control with this bad PR, which I think was a very piss poor move because unfortunately, the bullshit PR response, from TK would have served much better here. We do not wish this upon anyone. All of the bullshit, if this happened to LuFisto, I wish that she would have come to me personally so we could have resolved it. But nonetheless, we will look into this. We will investigate it. We will make sure that it never happens again. If it were to have happened, we don't condone these kind of things here in AEW.
Women's wrestling is a top priority to us. We love our locker room. We have one of the greatest women's locker room of all time, and the talent here, blah, blah, blah. He usually says this on a normal day. Today, and this instance, he didn't say none of that. How many times is it? We have one of the greatest locker rooms. We have great professional wrestling. Where was that? I would have taken that today.
All of that corporate BS, it still would have been BS, but you know what? From the company standpoint, it's the best option. It really is. Impact is widely known. I don't mean to bring up Impact because I cover Impact on Thursdays, but Impact is widely known for having the best women's division in pro wrestling. I don't think that's debatable at this point.
How many reports have we read?
None.
About issues out of that locker room.
Thank you.
Zero.
Exactly where I was fucking going.
Zero.
Oh, none. So if you get one out of AEW, it happens. Two, with one of your major stars in Thunder Rosa, a second time, okay, maybe it was a personal thing, her and Britt, who knows? A third time, and if you still think that it's all BS, everything in the women's division in AEW is completely hunky-dory, and all three of these situations are all BS and all lies, you are the one that is closing your eyes to potential issues and drama. Maybe the reports are not getting it 100% correct. I entirely believe that because they normally don't. But again, that doesn't mean that they're all wrong. And when there is smoke, there is fire. Something is not right. Something is off in the women's division. You think it's all perfect and great, and everyone who speaks poorly about it either don't know or are lying. You are the one that is closing your eyes to the damn potential truth by just believing what you want to believe.
Yeah, it's sad. LuFisto ended with this today. She legitimately tweeted this out at 5 p.m. today. Good that everyone at AEW got the memo to write as much shit on me as possible so I can be seen as a waste of a human being and not worth living. Even people who never had a single conversation with me, even better to see people I never did anything wrong with being so desperate to get a job, jumping on the bandwagon. Soon I'll see you hypocrites be a part of Be a Star and Mental Health Matters advertisements, acting like you care. Enjoy your paychecks and keep on stabbing each other in the back, pretending this is normal. I can only hope that your hate towards me will get you to finally fucking work together for the best of women's wrestling now that problems have been called out. So many miserable, frustrated will whisper their anger, but will never stand and speak up. I wanted to leave this world knowing women's wrestling was better. It was for a while, but not anymore. The sad part is that you accept it without saying a word. It is what it is. What a waste. She ends with that on Twitter today at 5 p.m.
Now, if you want to believe that what she's saying is lying or maybe a misunderstanding or whatever the case may be, if you want to side with the women's locker room and that these people are all wrong in what they're saying, okay, fine. But now, what the locker room, the men and the women, I don't get how MJF would know exactly what's happening in the women's locker room. But if you want to go out and then tweet everything that's being tweeted right now, that is legit certified cyberbullying. How are you making the situation any better? If you are willing to go out and cyberbully her for coming out and speaking from her experience, then why would we not believe that you were bullying her backstage?
Imagine that, bro. She had a problem with what happened in the AEW women's locker room, and she wanted it to be better, even though she doesn't work there. She wanted it to be better, and she called it out, and everybody stood in defense of the wrongdoings that are happening there, and then they rile up everybody on their end, fans and locker room alike, to go and attack this woman for standing on her own 2 feet and speaking up about the obvious wrongs. We don't need to be there. We've seen it. This is the 3rd time.
Same as Big Swole.
And Jesse's right. It is bullying. They did it to me.
Yep, it's cyber bullying, dude. If you want to send a memo out, if this is what happened, to tell your staff to go out and tweet something, how about this instead? Tell them, do not mention it. Do not publicly bring it up. I, the owner, will put out a press release addressing it, and that will be the end of it. Done. No one's bullied. It doesn't carry on. You don't have your talent out there arguing with fans. You're arguing with fans. What the fuck is this, dude? You have to know when to be a professional. If someone is, let's say LuFisto's completely lying about it, let TK handle it. What if she's telling the truth? Let TK handle it. Why would you send a dozen of your top stars out there to publicly bash a low-end indie wrestler? We're not talking about Charlotte Flair out there saying this shit. Who is LuFisto? I've never seen her do anything. Why do you care so much?
Listen, to be fair, so we can get the hell out of here. To be fair, the personal issues and the allegations, I don't give a fuck about. It's none of our business. If there's personal issues there, it's got to be resolved between the parties and LuFisto. Number one. Yes. Number two, is there any credence to what she said? Absolutely. I fully believe that there is some truth to what she brought to the table here. Okay, because we heard it last spring. There was a tumultuous locker room every other fucking week. It was something going on there, whether it was Eddie Kingston and Sammy Guevara, Andrade and Sammy Guevara, CM Punk and the Young Bucks. I mean, the locker room was just exploding. Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker. I mean, you know what happened last year, and this is the time period that we're talking about. Could structure be different now?
Sammy Guevara.
Yeah, could structure be different now? Are things better now? Probably. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that they didn't get better. I'm sure that they are. I mean, hopefully they are for the sake of this company. Yes. But the thing is, you know, all of this now coming out now and their behavior just shows you exactly what Jesse and I talked about with the Britt Baker Thunder Rosa situation. There is no leadership in that locker room. Political favors are being called in and favoritism is heavily being shown, and the locker room is a fucking mess because of it. That's just the situation. And you want to know what the difference is between WWE and AEW? You could look at this and get all the fucking answers that you need. You will never see anything like this happen over on the WWE side of the fence because they're professional about it. WWE would have already put out a statement if it was fucking terrible. If it was needed a statement, they would have put out a statement, and not one single person in that locker room would have said anything. They would have been told to shut the fuck up and shut their phones off and handle business because they are a representation of the company.
Yes.
These people are representations of Tony Khan. Jesse, if Tony Khan is allowing his people to do what they did, this is a reputation of Tony Khan, not just AEW, Tony Khan. That is a terrible fucking look, man. There's no leadership. And to me, honestly, structure and leadership needs to get on board because I don't think it's fully there.
No, I entirely agree. All of these wrestlers coming out in defense of their locker room, none of them, not a single one of those tweets made this situation better.
No.
None of it. It only made it worse.
I don't know when you guys are going to be seeing this. Jesse and I are recording this right before SmackDown, but I appreciate you being here. Jesse, appreciate you being here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please follow us on social media, X, Twitter, whatever the fuck it's called now. I still call it Twitter.
X is Twitter.
At JD from NY206 on X. You guys can follow Jesse as well at Chi-Town Smart. Go check out his YouTube channel as he covers Impact weekly on Thursdays. It's going to be a big weekend for me. I got you guys covered on everything this SummerSlam weekend. And please hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the bell for all notifications. Also hit that thumbs up. Try for 1,000 likes minimum and share this motherfucker, man, because this was a great discussion. And I believe that this topic and this conversation needs to be heard in the IWC. Until then, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you later.